2. We're live at the Washington Convention Center here at the opening of the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee annual conference. Vice President Dick Cheney is among the scheduled speakers this morning. It should get underway in just a couple of minutes. One of several panels and events we're covering here at this conference today on C-SPAN 2. Later today, we will have coverage of the U.S. Senate. They're in today at 2:30 Eastern for more work on the Homeland Security bill. The House is in at noon today and 12:30 today for general speeches, morning hour, 2 o'clock for legislative business. Again, we're live at the Washington Convention Center waiting to hear from Vice President Dick Cheney.
You have devoted yourselves to strengthening the bonds between the United States and Israel.
A partnership that has and will continue to change the world for the better.
And I think Israel is especially lucky that AIPAC exists in this country.
You are unique.
AIPAC's continued support is more important now than ever before.
On behalf of the State of Israel,
I thank you for being our partner.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome AIPAC President-elect David Victor.
Thank you. As everybody in this room knows, nothing has been more essential to Israel's survival than the continued support of our country, the United States of America. When it comes to standing with Israel, this administration has been unflinching and steadfast. This administration has stated clearly to the world that the United States and Israel are united in the war against terrorism, both sharing common threats. The administration has stated during Israel's war with Hezbollah this past summer in Lebanon, the administration continued to support Israel's efforts to defend herself, even as an international chorus rose calling for a hasty end to Israel's actions. Consistently, it has defended the Jewish state in the United Nations, vetoing one-sided resolutions. After Hamas came to power, it was this White House that laid down clear markers, conditioning its dealing with the Palestinian Authority upon its renunciation of terror, its acceptance of past agreements, and its recognition of Israel's right to exist. And this administration is continuing to work tirelessly to build international consensus to ensure that Iran does not achieve the nuclear weapons it is pursuing in open defiance of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the principal architects of these policies is our honored guest today, Vice President Dick Cheney. Mr. Vice President, we want to express our gratitude to you and to President Bush for your leadership, your resolve, and for always standing with Israel. Please join me in welcoming the Vice President of the United States of America, Dick Cheney.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Karl Rove finds out about this, he won't let me out again. Well, thank you very much for that warm welcome. And David, let me thank you for the introduction. And let me thank the AIPAC Board of Directors and the members from all across America for the opportunity to be here today. I have many friends in the hall, and I especially want to acknowledge Salai Meridor, Israel's ambassador to the U.S., and of course Tzipi Livni, Israel's foreign minister. I also want to recognize the many students who've come from across the country, even some, I'm told, from Wyoming. Welcome to Washington. It's great to see you all here. We're here today as citizens from different parts of the country, diverse backgrounds, many professions, and various political affiliations. Yet we find unity and strength in the values of liberty and equality, in our belief in democracy and the rule of law, and in our devotion to the security of America's friend, the State of Israel. As members of AIPAC, you play a vital role in making the strategic and moral case for America's friendship with Israel. I commend AIPAC for the fine work you do, not just at this annual event, but every day of the year. It's good to be in your company, and I bring warm regards from the President of the United States, George W. Bush. As most of you know, the President is traveling in Latin America this week, solidifying our friendships in that region and promoting an agenda of democracy, economic progress, and security. He asked me to convey to this gathering his great appreciation for your efforts, his strong support for Israel, and his firm commitment to peace in the Holy Land, built on a foundation of security, not surrender. The President has been clear and forthright about his vision of two democratic states, Israel and Palestine, living side by side in peace. He remains committed to the achievement of that vision, nor has he compromised the basic principles he has stated from the very beginning. Peace requires a Palestinian government that recognizes Israel's right to exist, accepts the validity of past agreements, and renounces violence and terrorism totally and completely. Progress in the cause of security and long-term peace never comes easily. Yet the United States and Israel persevere in that cause. We understand, as Ariel Sharon put it, the right and responsibility of every democracy, if it wishes to survive, to protect itself and its values. Doing so requires moral clarity, the courage of our convictions, a willingness to act when action is necessary, and a refusal to submit to any form of intimidation ever. These qualities are a credit to the American and the Israeli people, and these qualities are tested every day as we wage the war on terror. Israelis know this because rockets are shot at them, and 3 Israeli soldiers are now being held hostage, 2 by Hezbollah, 1 by Hamas, even as we meet here today. We are the prime targets of a terror movement that is global in nature and, yes, global in its ambitions. The leaders of this movement speak openly and specifically of building a totalitarian empire covering the Middle East, extending into Europe, and reaching across to the islands of Indonesia. One that would impose a narrow, radical vision of Islam that rejects tolerance, suppresses dissent, brutalizes women, and has one of its foremost objectives the destruction of Israel. Their creed is extreme and backward-looking, yet their methods are modern and sophisticated. The terrorists use the internet to spread propaganda, to find new recruits, and they're employing every other tool of communication and finance to carry out their plans. It's odd to think of ideologues out of the Dark Ages having a modern media strategy, but the fact is they do. They take videos of their attacks and put them up on the internet to get them broadcast on television. They send messages and images by email and tell their followers to spread the word. They wage war by stealth and murder, disregarding the rules of warfare and rejoicing in the death of the innocent. And not even the instinct of self-preservation is a restraint. The terrorists value death the same way you and I value life. Civilized, decent societies will never fully understand the kind of mindset that drives men to strap on bombs or fly airplanes into buildings, all for the purpose of killing unsuspecting men, women, and children who they have never met and who have done them no wrong. But that is the very kind of blind, prideful hatred we're up against. And their aim, ultimately, is to acquire the means to match that hatred and to use chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons to impose their will by unspeakable violence or blackmail. An enemy that operates in the shadows and views the entire world as a battlefield is not one we can fight with strategies used in other wars. An enemy with fantasies of martyrdom is not going to sit down at a table for negotiations. Nor can we fight to a standoff hoping that some form of containment or deterrence will protect our people. The only option for our security and survival is to go on the offensive, facing the threat directly, patiently, and systematically until the enemy is destroyed. The war on terror is more than a contest of arms and more than a test of will. It is also a battle of ideas. We know now to a certainty that when people across the Middle East are denied freedom, that is a direct strategic concern of all free nations. By taking the side of moderates, reformers, and advocates for democracy, by providing an alternative to hateful ideologies, we improve the chances for a lasting peace and we advance our own security interest. In the last 2 years, we have seen hopeful changes as men and women showed their desire to live in freedom. And we have seen the enemy's fierce reaction. In 2005, the people of Lebanon proclaimed the Cedar Revolution and drove out their Syrian occupiers. That same year, the people of Afghanistan elected a parliament. And in Iraq, citizens voted in 3 national elections, turning out in the millions to defy killers and car bombers and to elect a government that serves under the most progressive constitution in the Arab world. In 2006, freedom's enemies struck back with new tactics and greater fury. In Lebanon, Hezbollah terrorists who are supported by Iran and Syria attacked Israel, killing Israelis and sending rockets into civilian areas, and have since worked to undermine Lebanon's democratically elected government. Also in 2006, Taliban and al-Qaeda fighters in Afghanistan waged a new offensive against Afghan and NATO forces. In Iraq, Sunni and Shia extremists engaged in an escalating sectarian struggle that continues to this day. Our duty is to face all of these challenges with resolve, and we are doing so. In Afghanistan, where I visited just a few weeks ago, American and NATO forces are preparing a spring offensive against Taliban and al-Qaeda fighters. In Iraq, our goal remains a democratic nation that upholds the rule of law, respects the rights of its people, provides them security, and is an ally in the war on terror. But for this to happen, the elected government in Iraq needs the space and the time to work on reconciliation goals and it's hard to do that without basic security in Baghdad. Our coalition is pursuing a new strategy that brings in reinforcements to help Iraqi forces secure the capital so that nation can move forward and the political process can turn toward reconciliation. A few weeks ago, the new coalition commander, General Dave Petraeus, arrived in the Iraq theater. He sent a written message to his soldiers, and with your forbearance, I'd like to quote from it at length. "The enemies of Iraq," he said, "will shrink at no act, however barbaric. They will do all that they can to shake the confidence of the people and to convince the world that this effort is doomed. We must not underestimate them. Together with our Iraqi partners, we must defeat those who oppose the new Iraq. We cannot allow mass murderers to hold the initiative. We must strike them relentlessly. We and our Iraqi partners must set the terms of the struggle, not our enemies, and together we must prevail." End quote. As we meet, ladies and gentlemen, General Petraeus and his troops are in the midst of some extremely tough, intense, and dangerous work. The President and I have been briefed on their progress. These American soldiers represent the best that is in our country. They're well-trained and professional, their morale is high, they're giving this mission everything they've got, and they are doing an absolutely brilliant job. It's always the case in wartime that the heaviest duties fall on the men and women of the military. The ones doing the fighting never lose their focus on their mission or on what is at stake in this war, and neither should the rest of us. 5.5 years have passed since the attacks of September 11, 2001, and the loss that morning of nearly 3,000 Americans inside the United States. As we get farther away from 9/11, I believe there's a temptation to forget the urgency of the task that came to us that day and the comprehensive approach that's required to protect this country against an enemy that moves and acts on multiple fronts. In fact, 5.5 years into the struggle, we find ourselves having to confront a series of myths about the war on terror, myths that are often repeated and deserve to be refuted. The most common myth is that Iraq has nothing to do with the global war on terror. Opponents of our military action there have called Iraq a diversion from the real conflict, a distraction from the business of fighting and defeating bin Laden and the al-Qaeda network. We hear this over and over again, not as an argument, but as an assertion meant to close off argument. Yet the critics conveniently disregard the words of bin Laden himself. "The most serious issue today for the whole world," he has said, "is this third world war that is raging in Iraq." He calls it a war of destiny between infidelity and Islam. He said the whole world is watching this war and that it will end in victory and glory or misery and humiliation. And in words directed at the American people, bin Laden declares, quote, "The war is for you or for us to win. If we win it, it means your defeat and disgrace forever." This leader of al-Qaeda has referred to Baghdad as the capital of the caliphate. He has also said, and I quote, "Success in Baghdad will be success for the United States. Failure in Iraq is the failure of the United States. Their defeat in Iraq will mean defeat in all their wars." End quote. Obviously, the terrorists have no illusion about the importance of the struggle in Iraq. They have not called it a distraction or a diversion from their war against the United States. They know it is a central front in that war, and it's where they've chosen to make a stand. Our Marines are fighting al-Qaeda terrorists today in Anbar province. U.S. and Iraqi forces recently killed al-Qaeda terrorists in Baghdad who were responsible for numerous car bomb attacks. Iraq's relevance to the war on terror simply could not be more plain. Here at home, that makes one thing above all very clear. If you support the war on terror, then it only makes sense to support it where the terrorists are fighting us. The second myth is the most transparent, and that is the notion that one can support the troops without giving them the tools and reinforcements needed to carry out their mission. Twisted logic is not exactly a new phenomenon in Washington, but last month it did reach new heights. At a hearing of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Senator John McCain put the following question to General Petraeus. Suppose we send you over to your new job, only we tell you that you cannot have any additional troops. Can you get your job done? General Petraeus replied, no, sir. Yet within days of his confirmation by a unanimous vote in the Senate, I repeat, a unanimous vote of confidence in General Petraeus, a large group of senators tried to pass a resolution opposing the reinforcements he said were necessary. And of course, the House of Representatives did pass such a resolution. As President Bush said, this may be the first time in history that a Congress voted to send a new commander into battle and then voted to oppose the plan he said was necessary in winning that battle. It was not a proud episode in the history of the United States Congress. The resolution that passed was not binding, only a statement of feelings. Yet other threats have been made that would hamper the war effort and interfere with the operational authority of the President and with our military commanders. These too are counterproductive and send exactly the wrong message. When members of Congress pursue an anti-war strategy that's been called slow bleed, they're not supporting the troops, they are undermining them. And when members of Congress speak not of victory but of time limits, when members speak not of victory but of time limits, deadlines, or other arbitrary measures, they're telling the enemy simply to watch the clock and wait us out. Congress does, of course, play a critical role in the defense of the nation and the conduct of a war. That role is defined and limited by the Constitution. After all, the military answers to one commander-in-chief in the White House, not 535 commanders-in-chief on Capitol Hill. Congress does have the purse strings, and very soon both houses will have to vote on a piece of legislation that is binding, a bill to provide emergency funding for the troops. And I sincerely hope the discussion this time will be about winning in Iraq. Anyone can say they support the troops, and we should take them at their word. But the proof will come when it's time to provide the money. We expect the House and Senate to meet the needs of our military and the generals leading the troops in battle on time and in full measure. There is a third myth about the war on terror, and this one is also the most dangerous. Some apparently believe that getting out of Iraq before the job is done will actually strengthen America's hand in the fight against terrorists. This myth is dangerous because it represents a full validation of the al-Qaeda strategy. The terrorists don't expect to beat us in a stand-up fight. They never have. They're not likely to try. The only way they can win is if we lose our nerve and abandon our mission, and the terrorists do believe that they can force that outcome. Time after time, they have predicted that the American people do not have the stomach for a long-term fight. They cite the cases of Beirut in the 1980s and Somalia in the 90s. These examples, they believe, show that we are weak and decadent, and that if we're hit hard enough, we'll pack it in and retreat. The result would be even greater danger to the United States, because if the terrorists conclude that attacks will change the behavior of a nation, they will attack that nation again and again. Believing they can break our will, they will become more audacious in their tactics, ever more determined to strike and kill our citizens, ever more bold in their ambitions of conquest and empire. And that leads me to the fourth and the cruelest myth of all. That is the false hope that we can abandon the effort in Iraq without serious consequences to the broader Middle East. I stand here today as a strong supporter of Israel, and Israel has never had a better friend in the White House than George Bush. Friends owe it to friends to be as candid as possible. So let me say that a precipitous American withdrawal from Iraq would be a disaster for the United States and the entire Middle East. It's not hard to imagine what could occur if our coalition withdrew before Iraqis could defend themselves. Moderates would be crushed. Shiite extremists backed by Iran could be in an all-out war with Sunni extremists led by al-Qaeda and remnants of the old Saddam regime. As this battle unfolded, Sunni governments might feel compelled to back Sunni extremists in order to counter growing Iranian influence, widening the conflict into a regional war. If Sunni extremists prevailed, al-Qaeda and its allies would recreate the safe haven they lost in Afghanistan, except now with the oil wealth to pursue weapons of mass destruction and underwrite their terrorist designs, including their pledge to destroy Israel. If Iran's allies prevailed, the regime in Tehran's own designs for the Middle East would be advanced, and the threat to our friends in the region would only be magnified. My friends, it is simply not consistent for anyone to demand aggressive action against the menace posed by the Iranian regime, while at the same time acquiescing in a retreat from Iraq that would leave our worst enemies dramatically emboldened and Israel's best friend, the United States, dangerously weakened. We must consider as well just what a precipitous withdrawal would mean to our other efforts in the war on terror and to our interest in the broader Middle East. Having tasted victory in Iraq, jihadists would look abroad for new missions. Many would head for Afghanistan to fight alongside the Taliban. Others would set out for capitals across the Middle East, spreading more discord as they eliminate dissenters and work to undermine moderate governments. Still others would find their targets and victims in other countries on other continents. What would it say to the world if we left high and dry those millions of people who have counted on the United States to keep its commitments? And what would it say to leaders like President Karzai and President Musharraf, who risk their lives every day as fearless allies in the war on terror? Commentators enjoy pointing out mistakes through the perceptive power of hindsight. But the biggest mistake of all can be seen in advance. A sudden withdrawal of our coalition would dissipate much of the effort that's gone into fighting the global war on terror and result in chaos and mounting danger. And for the sake of our own security, we will not stand by and let it happen. Five and a half years ago, the President told the Congress and the country that we had entered a new kind of war, one that would require patience and resolve, and that would influence the policies of this government far into the future. The fact that we have succeeded in stopping another attack on our homeland does not mean our country won't be hit in the future. But the record is testimony, not to good luck, but to urgent, competent action by a lot of very skilled men and women, and to a series of tough decisions by a president who never forgets his first job is to protect the people of this country. It would be easier, no doubt, to avoid controversy by following snapshot polls or catering to elite opinion or seeking political refuge in comfortable myths. But President Bush understands, as Ronald Reagan did, that if history teaches anything, it teaches self-delusion in the face of unpleasant facts is folly. Either we are serious about fighting the war on terror or we are not. Either we persevere despite difficulty or we turn our backs on our friends, our commitments, and our ideals. I, for one, have never had more confidence in the outcome because America is the kind of country that fights for freedom, and because at this very hour, our soldiers are engaging the enemy on the field of battle. One of the great examples of leadership in our world is that of Ariel Sharon, a man of courage and a man of peace who remains in our thoughts. In his last speech at the United Nations, Prime Minister Sharon said his great passion in life was manual labor, sowing and harvesting the pastures, the flock, and the cattle. If the circumstances had not demanded it, he said, he would not have become a soldier, but rather a farmer, an agriculturalist. But life had other plans for this Israeli patriot, and he did his duty until the very ending of his strength. Ladies and gentlemen, the circumstances that have demanded much of this great nation, but we are more than equal to the test. America is a good and an honorable country. We serve a cause that is right and a cause that gives hope to the oppressed in every corner of this earth. We are defended by some of the bravest citizens this nation has ever produced. We're in a war that was begun on the enemy's terms. We're fighting that war on our own terms, and we will prevail. Thank you all very much.
Pilot ever since I was probably 4 or 5, 6 years old. And so I went to the Air Force Academy, and then Vietnam was going on. I was over there in 1967 and 68 during TET, flew 240 combat missions over there. Then I went back full-time with the Air Guard and ended up as head of the Air Guard in the Pentagon. My first trip to Israel was probably around 1993 when I was on active duty to look at what technology they had in Israel that would be useful to us. I came from the era in airplanes where we really looked great in our airplane. They were fun to fly, but we couldn't find what we were after, and we found that we couldn't hit it. Or if we could hit it, we lost airplanes doing it. We needed to be able to find targets day and night in all kinds of weather and hit them. What the Lightning Pod did for us basically was find targets day and night with precision, track even moving target. We incorporated that in the Air National Guard, and we got that idea from Israel. Air Force has been active in Iraq for 12 or 15 years. The Lightning Pod was used in those conflicts. It's been used in Kosovo, and of course it was used in the recent Gulf War as well. A good example of the use of the Lightning Pod was the strike on Zarqawi in Iraq. We got him because of the Lightning Pod. We saved a lot of lives in the American military and a lot of lives of Iraqis on the ground because we were able to identify and hit the right thing. I think there is a natural respect between the United States military and all services and Israel because of their success. Real simple. Israel basically is an example of a country and a military that goes up against overwhelming odds. 7 million of them against 350 million neighbors that don't wish them well. So we look at them repeatedly for technology and the things that can aid a military in the modern world. Clearly, America and Israel share not only values, but they share a common enemy, which is a war, a worldwide war on radical Islamic terrorists. Israel's an American asset because they are our only true friend in the Middle East. a reliable political ally upon whom we can depend. The only country over there that shares our values, our Judeo-Christian heritage, if you will. So they're extremely important to us. All of those make it a very, very important friend and ally for us.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome AIPAC National Board Member Harriet Zimmerman.
Thank you. It is said that men in battle come to learn quickly what a friendship means. Today, please welcome a man who understands what a friend and what an asset Israel is, General Don Shepard. This morning, I have the great privilege of introducing one of Israel's brightest stars, Vice Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Tzipi Livni. Minister Livni's political career can best be described with one word: meteoric. In 3 successive governments, she has held a wide number of ministerial positions, overseeing portfolios as diverse as regional cooperation, agriculture, immigrant absorption, housing, and construction and justice. But she brings much more than a full resume to her current position as foreign minister. At a moment in Israel's history when tough-minded diplomacy must blend with creativity, strategic thinking, and innovation, Tzipi Livni has shown that she has the requisite skills and qualities of leadership that are an imperative for this very difficult job. Her penchant for cutting right to the heart of the most complicated issues facing Israel has earned her unique respect in Israel, in Europe, throughout the Middle East, and of course right here in Washington. She is among the most popular politicians in Israel today, and high on the list of the next generation of Kadima leaders. Minister Livni, we applaud your unrelenting efforts to bring about a diplomatic resolution to the conflict between Israel and her neighbors, and know that you will not rest until Israel finds security and peace. And you should know that we shall not rest either. Please join me in welcoming Israeli Vice Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Harriet. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is a great honor for me to be here today, especially after Vice President Cheney, and I would like to take this opportunity to express our appreciation for his words today, but also for his support for Israel. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that we are defined as individuals, as leaders, and as nations by our values and by the choices we make to defend them. The American-Israeli Strategic Alliance is a partnership built on common values and not just common interests. In a world where so much is based on narrow interest, an alliance that is founded on shared ideals is unique. This alliance transcends politics. Here, in the United States, it enjoys bipartisan support, and in Israel, where we love to argue about everything, I can assure you that in Israel, you will hear only one voice. We, the people of Israel, cherish this friendship. Our governments are partners, our peoples are friends, in good times and in bad. And we must never take this for granted, and because of that, we will never, but never, take AIPAC for granted. Let me say loudly and clearly, on behalf of the government of Israel and the people of Israel, thank you, AIPAC. Thank you. The U.S.-Israel relationship is of utmost importance, especially now. We are in the midst of a struggle for the future of the free world. The outcome of this struggle will shape this century and the kind of world we, Americans and Israelis, pass on to our children. The cost has already been painful, and our hearts goes out to those families who lost their loved ones in this struggle. Dear friends, there are moments in history where the threats are clear and prevention is possible, but only if we work together. In order to confront threats, we must first identify and understand them. Our world is changing and being divided between moderates and extremists. Extremist forces seek to transform national conflicts, which are so resolvable, into an endless religious war. The extremists are not fighting for their own rights. They are fighting to deprive others of their rights. The extremists use mass media like Al Jazeera and the internet not to promote coexistence, but to spread hate. And the extremists want to exploit our values, our desire to resolve conflicts peacefully, and our tolerance for others. The Middle East is also changing. Yes, there are threats. We can see the extremists headed by Iran, with its proxy Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Hamas in the Palestinian Authority. But there are also new opportunities. We can see the old division of the Middle East being replaced. We can see today, more than ever, Israelis, Palestinians, and pragmatic Arab and Muslim leaders moving into the same camp, sharing the same interest for a peaceful and stable Middle East. Now we need a dual strategy that empowers the moderates while, at the same time, weakening the extremists. Ladies and gentlemen, to address extremism is to address Iran. This is a regime which calls for the destruction of a state, a member of the United Nations, Israel, my home. This alone should deny it a place in the community of nations. It is a regime which denies the Holocaust while threatening the world with a new one. It is a regime driven by a radical religious ideology with the goal of dominating the region, exporting terror, and preventing peace. The Iranian threat is clear, not just to Israel and the Western world. Maybe Arab and Gulf states feel it too. They also cannot afford a nuclear Iran, and believe me, love for Israel has nothing to do with it. They know, as we do, that even if the Israeli-Palestinian conflict magically disappeared, Iran's radical ideology would remain. And they know, as we do, that there is no path to a stable world or a peaceful Middle East that does not involve addressing this threat. The international community must not close its eyes. It must defeat this danger, not for Israel's sake, but for its own, for the sake of its own security and for the sake of the values it claims to hold dear. We know that there is much more that needs to be done, and time is of the essence. The initial sanctions on Tehran have had an impact, and as part of our collective effort, they must be strengthened and expanded without delay. Yes. And to those states who know the threat but still hesitate because of narrow economic or political interest, let me say this: history will remember. Ladies and gentlemen, the free world is being watched. The Middle East is a tough neighborhood, and when there is a bully in this neighborhood, there are only two choices: to beat it or to join it. If states in the region feel that the world will not stop Iran, they may feel the need to appease it. We live in a region where images matter and where the perception of weakness can have far-reaching consequences. If we appease the extremists, if they feel that we are backing down, they will sense victory and become more dangerous not only to the region, but to the world. This applies to the decisions made on Iran. It is true for Iraq, and it is true across the Middle East. And it is why it is so important for the international community, with American leadership, to project strength, to demonstrate absolute determination in achieving its objective and absolute commitment to its values. Ladies and gentlemen, the international community is also being tested in Lebanon. The goals are clear: to establish an independent Lebanon, an independent state which exercises sovereignty over its territory, dismantles militias, and enjoys peaceful relations with its neighbors, including Israel. But Syria, Iran, and Hezbollah are determined to prevent this. Security Council resolutions are clear on the actions that need to be taken. So the international forces in Lebanon have brought changes on the ground, but other parts of these resolutions must be implemented fully. The immediate task is to enforce the arms embargo and prevent the ongoing efforts of Syria and Iran to rearm Hezbollah. These illegal weapons destabilize Lebanon, endanger UNIFIL, and threaten Israel. They must not and will not be tolerated. Most painful for every Israeli is that the hostages, Eldad Regev and Ehud Goldwasser, remain in captivity. Israel is one family. Eldad and Dudi are our sons. And we will do everything, but everything in our power to bring them home. We know that our enemies see this desire as our weakness, but they are wrong. It is our greatest strength. Dear friends, when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, our vision for peace is drawn from the ultimate goal of Israel, the reason for its existence, the raison d'etre of Israel, to be a Jewish and democratic state, secure in our ancient homeland. We want to live in peace. We have no desire to control Palestinian lives. We deserve security, and our children deserve a future free of hate and full of hope. So based on these core principles, the vision is clear. 2 states, 2 homelands for 2 peoples. Israel, homeland for the Jewish people, wherever they may be, and Palestine, the national answer for the Palestinians, wherever they may be, including the refugees. Two states living side by side in peace and security, and the meaning is clear. The future state of Palestine cannot be and won't be a terror state. And that is why President Bush's vision and the roadmap insist that the road to statehood goes through the elimination of terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a zero-sum game. This vision is not pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian. It is pro-peace. And Israel has made its choice. Across Israeli society, we have embraced this vision and accepted the sacrifices that comes with it. The disengagement plan proved this. With great pain, we uprooted families from their homes in order to create an opportunity for peace. Sadly, we received terror in return. And yet, we have not stopped hoping that the Palestinians will make their choice for peace. Unfortunately, in the last elections, they chose Hamas, a terrorist organization driven by an extreme religious ideology. Hamas's goal is not to create a Palestinian state, but to destroy the Jewish one. The international community, through the quartet, has repeatedly insisted that any Palestinian government must fully commit to the 3 core principles: renunciation of terror, recognition of Israel, and acceptance of previous agreements. These requirements are not obstacles for peace, but fundamental principles for peace. So I believe in the dialogue, but there are some things that are not up for negotiations. Because we cannot and we will not negotiate our right to exist. No one has the right to do so in our name. We cannot and we will not negotiate about the need to accept former agreements. They are the outcomes of tough negotiations and mutual concessions. They are not a menu to choose from. And of course, we will never negotiate over terror, because Israeli lives are not bargaining chips. This is the test for the Palestinian government as a whole, regardless of its members. We expect the international community to defend the requirements for peace, We expect it to stand against terror, not to compromise with it. Ladies and gentlemen, stagnation is not in our interest and not in our policy. This is the reason that despite our disappointment from the MICA agreement, we have not closed the door to dialogue with the moderates. Just yesterday, Prime Minister Olmert met with Chairman Abbas. But we must understand that the choice depends on a clear distinction between the moderates and the extremists. And being a moderate is a title that has to be earned. A moderate is someone who is ready to confront terror, someone who believes in the two-states vision and accepts its true meaning. Israel remains willing to work with the moderates if they are willing to empower themselves and distinguish themselves from the enemies of peace. This includes undertaking genuine efforts to release of Gilad Shalit, who is in our prayers every day. It includes bringing an end to daily attacks on Israeli homes and the smuggling of weapons across the Gaza-Egypt border. Yes. And it includes preparing the Palestinian people for the compromises and historic reconciliation that any true peace will require from both sides. Dear friends, all of us are eager to see peace in the Middle East. Nobody wants it more than Israel, because this is about our lives and the future of our children. Lasting peace is possible if it is built on solid foundation and shared values. Despite all the challenges, I am optimistic because I can see new opportunities emerging. Moderates and pragmatic leaders are beginning to see Israel not as an enemy of a violent past, but as a partner in a common and peaceful future. The challenge that we all face as leaders in the Middle East is to say this publicly to our people and to teach it to our children. We are ready to do our part, and we hope our neighbors are ready to do theirs. And today, from this podium, I call on Arab and Muslim states, those who condition their relations with Israel on the end of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, not to wait any more. You have the power to change reality and to encourage Palestinians to embrace coexistence. Do not wait for peace to come before you normalize relations with us. Normalize relations now and peace will come. Ladies and gentlemen, as we say in Hebrew, En li eretz acheret, we have no other homeland. We also have no other values. For 60 years, we have fought for our existence without compromising our principles, our vision, or our dream for peace. We are moderates by definition. We are not threatening to turn into extremists. I believe in Israel, and I'm proud to represent it. I am proud of the strength and vitality of our economy. I believe in the courage and innovation of our people. And I believe in the United States-Israeli partnership and the values on which it is founded. I know that you feel the same, and the future depends on us. Thank you.
and I feel strongly about being very active with our children and encouraging them to, most importantly, be good people, to be empathetic, to be generous, but also to recognize that they have a legacy as Jews, and that comes with responsibility to Israel. September 11th really changed our life because not only did we recognize that the horrors of what Israelis were dealing with every day. In Washington, here, we had the sniper right after 9/11. So our children were not able to go out and play. We had to be very careful when we dropped them off at school. And there was a real feeling of what we recognized our friends in Israel must feel every single day. A few years ago, when I took my two boys and my mother to Israel, it was the first time that we really started paying attention to the international media, and we saw how many people really hated Israel. Not only the Arab countries, but the European countries, the United Nations. It just went on and on. It came back to me that really the only friend that Israel has is the United States and the U.S. Congress, and that's where I should be putting my time. The first time I met my congressman was at an AIPAC policy conference. After visiting, I just did something that came naturally. I sent him a thank you note, and then I followed up with another note or card or an article that I thought might interest him. Separately, I have made sure that I've gotten a little bit involved in his campaign and started just seeing him regularly, and we got to know each other.
Part of the discussion in the whole region.
I always encouraged him to go to Israel, and I kept saying, I know him on a first-name basis now, and I kept saying, Chris, when are you going to go to Israel? This past summer, during the war in Lebanon, he rearranged his schedule, and he got to see firsthand what was happening on the ground, and I felt like I had a part in that. A number of my friends asked me, especially women, how can you do that? How can you go in and have a meeting with a congressman? How can you pick up the phone and speak with your senator? And I said, you can do it too.
Welcome to AIPAC.
So many incredible women out there who help so many organizations. We're also good at developing relationships. And that's the most important thing, I think, in terms of political activism, is the relationships that we develop. And there's thousands of women out there that should be involved. I had no background in terms of legislation that's going to help Israel, but I was educated by AIPAC staff. AIPAC provides me the opportunity to make a difference, to have relationships with the leaders of our country who are making decisions that are impacting Israel. I commit to AIPAC because it empowers me to have the greatest impact possible on helping Israel.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome AIPAC National Board Member Jeffrey Snyder.
Ladies and gentlemen, my dear friend and Washington's D.C. Council AIPAC Chair Hillary Smith Kapner. A little more than 15 years ago, I was asked by the Jewish Federation of Greater Washington to serve on the board of the Gesher Jewish Day School in Northern Virginia. At the time, Gesher was a young, growing school caught up in a nasty zoning fight in its efforts to move to new facilities. The board was young and inexperienced, but the president was up to the task. He was extraordinary at building consensus and exhibited deft political skills in achieving the zoning approval. He did all this despite the demands of his real job as senior staff member at AIPAC. Since that time, Howard Kohr's responsibilities at AIPAC have only grown. Today, as AIPAC's executive director, Howard is leading our community during some of the most troubling times we have seen, dealing with the most vexing challenges facing America and Israel. Howard's solid relationships span both sides of the political aisle, both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, and the highest sectors of the Israeli government. His passion to secure the future welfare of America and Israel drives his leadership. Whether testifying before key congressional committees on Capitol Hill, answering our questions in living rooms across the nation, meeting with Israel's highest officials, or standing right here before us at this podium, Howard Kohr's words and deeds move us to action. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce AIPAC's Executive Director, Howard Kohr.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, Jeff Snyder, thank you very much for that very kind and warm introduction, and more importantly, Jeff, thank you for your friendship over these years. You know, standing backstage during my pre-speech warm-up, taking a few sips of water, a quick review of my text, some deep breathing, maybe a couple of push-ups, I was trying not to think about how many people are out here today. Focusing on the enormity of an audience generally doesn't equal relaxation. But then I found that the enormity of the audience was all that I could think about. Not to psych myself up or to psych myself out, but I couldn't stop focusing on the fact that thousands of you, more than any other gathering in AIPAC's long history, have trekked to Washington for this conference, for this moment. Why? Why have so many more traveled, so many miles to be here? Why this year? Why now? I'm going to hazard a guess, and I'm sure it's not because of the food. I think it's because you, like me, are worried. Worried that the past 12 months have not been good. Not for Israel, not for America, not for democracy, nor for freedom. You're worried that Iran and Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, you're worried that all of them are on the march. Well, this is a difficult moment, a dark moment in our history. You are worried. We are all worried. Because you are here because you want to do something to make a difference. So I want to begin my speech today where I usually end it, with thanks and gratitude. Thanks because of the simple fact that you are here. Because at this difficult moment of danger, great danger, you have come to see what you can do. And because you will not rest until we prevail. This is a time to be worried, that is true. But I want to say something today, something bold, something our enemies would be surprised to hear. Because you came here, it is Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, and Al-Qaeda who should be worried, not you. Not us. They should be worried because this is our time to act. To be sure, it's been a difficult year. So many events of such great concern are taking place and shaping our world for the worse. Think back to the world as it was 12 months ago. Since we met last year, Iran is 1 year closer to a weapon it can use to achieve its goal of erasing Israel from the map. Since we met last year, Iran is testing ballistic missiles that are more capable of reaching Israel and parts of Europe. Since we met last year, Iranian engineers have added a new target to their list. They're working to extend their range to the United States. Since we met last year, Hezbollah, backed by Syria and Iran, launched a war against Israel, striking 4,000 times in 33 days. Now they are working to topple Lebanon's fragile government and struggling to regain positions on Israel's border. Since we met last year, Qassam rockets fired by Hamas struck Israel more than 1,500 times. Palestinians targeted Israelis with close to 600 shootings and 400 roadside bombs. Since we met last year, Hamas members continued to report to Syria and Iran to be trained in terror camps for what their leaders are proclaiming will soon be the final war to destroy the Zionist regime. Worse, 14 months after its election, a terrorist organization remains in control of the Palestinian Authority, thwarting any chance for meaningful progress with an Israel prepared to make peace. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a dangerous moment. For America, vital interests in the region are at stake. For Israel, her very existence ultimately hangs in the balance. But also this year, there were important moments of counterpunch by America, Israel, and the West that show not only the immediate vulnerabilities of our enemies, but also, if we truly understand their meaning, these events show us the way forward to lasting victory. Because, my friends, if we have reason to be worried, we also have reason to hope. American leadership and diplomacy have altered the playing field in Iran, in Lebanon, and with the Palestinians. This progress comes with a lesson and a warning. We've learned that American leadership, combined with international cooperation, makes a difference. But we should be mindful that this work is painstakingly slow, too slow. And if America eases the pressure, even just a little, small steps forward can easily be reversed into quantum leaps backward. United Nations Security Council Resolution 1737 was a watershed moment. In the battle to stop Iran's march towards nuclear weapons, it finally put the international community on record saying to Iran, "You are in violation of international law, and you must stop, or we will stop you." In addition, the United States has worked with the Europeans to launch the most ambitious financial sanctions campaign against Iran that the world has seen since the sanctions against Japan in the 1930s and South Africa in the 1980s. And at long last, Iran is beginning to feel the impact of our actions. In Lebanon, a combination of Israeli military action, American support, and UN Resolution 1701 resulted in dramatic, though still very tenuous, changes since those summer days of fear and fire. Last night, the children of Haifa, Tzfat, Nahariya, and neighboring towns of northern Israel slept in their beds, not in bomb shelters. Today, the Lebanese army has redeployed to the south. Hezbollah, though still very much a menace, no longer controls one-third of Lebanon. And instead of terrorists along Israel's northern border, there is an international force. On the Palestinian front, the quartet consisting of the United States, Russia, the European Union, and the United Nations agreed upon fundamental standards that a Hamas-led government must adhere to in order to gain international legitimacy or receive financial assistance. Hamas must recognize Israel's right to exist, end terrorism, and abide by past agreements with Israel. And when Hamas balked at these criteria and continued to declare its intent to push Israel into the sea, the international community has thus far, held firm, and the isolation of Hamas continues. Of course, the predicate for all this diplomatic and economic pressure is American resolve and American leadership. President Bush and his administration should be commended for their unwavering commitment to Israel's security. His support for Israel during the Lebanon war and the continued effort to galvanize the international community to stop Iran. We must also express a profound gratitude to Congress, because it was equally necessary for Congress to act, as they did with overwhelming bipartisanship, to support the administration efforts and to provide clarity and teeth to American policies regarding Iran, Lebanon, and with the Palestinians. As we saw in last night's video presentations, it was also this past year that American businessman Warren Buffett made his first foreign investment ever in an Israeli firm, Iskar. He was asked by our interviewers, why, when there was so much turmoil in the region, why, when so much venom and vengefulness is directed towards Israel for simply having the audacity to exist, why now would he invest $4 billion in Israel? He said he was inspired by Israel's economic progress and pioneer spirit. He said, because I am confident Israel will be there 10 years from now. But it's what Buffett told us next that has special meaning for all of us here today. When our interviewer asked, what about 100 years? Will Israel still be here? Buffett said the following: 100 years from now, there may not be an Israel. But if there is no Israel, I'm certain there will be no America either. My friends, in these first years of the 21st century, we are part of a fight for our future, for Israel and America's continued existence, two nations joined by common values, by a common vision of how we live on this earth. Shaping that vision is why you are here, to make real our dreams for a safe and secure future. Our motto must be, first words, then deeds. International condemnation must be followed by international actions to compel a real change within Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah. So what is our action agenda as we move forward? First, on Iran. My friends, it is no secret that we gather in our nation's capital at a highly charged, deeply partisan moment on a whole host of foreign policy and domestic questions. But Iran is an issue that must be treated differently. We must ask our elected officials to put aside their partisan divides and work together to avert disaster. We should be mindful that President Ahmadinejad and the mullahs in Iran are watching Washington very closely, taking their measure of our resolve every day. Any sign of weakness, any sense that we are willing to take options off the table will be taken as a signal that they can proceed with their plans. America's message must be clear on this issue. No divisions, no weakness. The next phase in the campaign to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear power is based on the proven fact that the initial financial sanctions are beginning to take hold. For those that told us that sanctions couldn't possibly work, Washington Post columnist David Ignatius begs to differ. In a recent column, he wrote that these new targeted financial measures are to traditional sanctions what super glue is to Elmer's glue. They actually stick. Some have suggested that this is the time to try to accommodate Iran, that if only the United States would offer to sit down at the table, all of our differences could be resolved. But we should remember that Iran has consistently exploited the negotiations process to advance a nuclear program that it kept secret for nearly 20 years. We should be under no illusions that Iran is stopping its nuclear march, or that the current sanctions are sufficient. But the fact is, as we gather here today, Iran is not yet a nuclear power. There is still time to stop them. But it will require a much more robust diplomatic, political, and economic sanctions regime. And that is why we must demand that the United Nations Security Council quickly adopt additional and stiffer sanctions. That is also why tomorrow we will lobby for the passage of a new piece of legislation, the Iran Counterproliferation Act of 2007. The act, co-sponsored by Congressman Tom Lantos and Congresswoman Ileana Ross-Layton in the House, and a companion bill in the Senate, will not only encourage the United Nations to act, it will include prescriptions to increase pressure on those nations that continue to help Iran. The legislation, for example, would prohibit a nuclear cooperation agreement with Russia unless it stops aiding Iran's nuclear program. And it includes measures aimed at further restricting Iranian access to the international banking system. Our critical congressional efforts on Capitol Hill are at the forefront of our work. But given the stakes, we must now take our lobbying beyond the Capitol down the street to the capitals in your home states. And that is why AIPAC will begin working with specific states to examine other avenues to choke off the vital funds Iran needs to build the bomb. Ladies and gentlemen, Iran's economy relies on money, expertise, equipment, and the technology provided by foreign, publicly traded companies doing business in Iran, in which millions of Americans own stock. Within a single pension fund in California, CalPERS, it was found that the fund had more than $1 billion invested in foreign companies developing Iran's energy sector. If the largest state pension funds in the country were to divest from companies with ties to Iran, it would have a crippling effect on Iran's economy. In this next year, AIPAC will be working with our partners in the Jewish and with other Jewish organizations and other organizations to support divestment efforts in 10 states around the country. We'll be asking you to work with your state's decision makers to educate them and to ask them to ensure that their state pension funds divest from a regime that threatens the safety of the world. Stiff sanctions and targeted divestments. These will be our focus as we work to keep the pressure on Iran. Next, the Palestinians. When Prime Minister Abbas agreed last month in Mecca to permit his Fatah party to join Hamas in a unity government without demanding that they first adhere to the quartet requirements, it raised the most profound questions about his intentions, his ability to lead, and quite frankly, the very strategy for dealing with them. We must ask, where is President Abbas leading his people? Is he leading them toward Hamas or toward the United States and Israel? If his answer is Hamas, then we must make sure that he understands that the consequence will be continued political, economic, and diplomatic isolation for the Palestinian Authority. If it is toward the United States and Israel, it could provide an opening for diplomatic progress to begin. Good friends, it is important to remember that our meetings tomorrow are a chance to convey to members of Congress why it is so critical that the Palestinian president follow his words with deeds, and what it will mean for the future of his people if he doesn't. To help make that abundantly clear, we are asking members in the Senate to sign the Nelson Ensign letter, which will be sent to Secretary of State Rice, asking the administration to continue its unwavering adherence to the quartet principles. In the House, we'll be asking members to sign the Wexler, Gallagly, Ackerman, Pence letter being sent to the European Union. The letter asks the European Union to stand strong on the premise there should be no diplomatic contact and no financial aid other than basic humanitarian to the Hamas-led Palestinian Authority until it accepts the quartet principles. Ladies and gentlemen, we must do all we can to ensure that Iran, Hamas, and Hezbollah fail. But with the outcome uncertain, the U.S.-Israel alliance becomes more important than ever. And this brings us to our final lobbying item for tomorrow. A vital part of the U.S.-Israel alliance manifests itself in American financial assistance to Israel. Many of you are aware that the underlying agreement for American aid to Israel that has been in place for the last decade expires this year. When that aid accord was achieved in 1997, it was based on a set of assumptions regarding the threats that Israel was likely to face over a 10-year horizon. Keep in mind that in 1997, it represented a high watermark for the Oslo process. Who could have imagined what was to come? Terror, war, regional and international isolation. To be sure, in 1997 there were threats, but they are not comparable to the challenges that Israel faces today, nor the dangers she will likely face in the decade to come. In preparing for these threats, Israel will certainly do its part in terms of increased military service by its citizens, greater defense spending, and in the development of new defense technologies. But without question, she will not be able to do it alone. The only reliable partner in responding to this challenge is the United States of America. And that is why our conversations tomorrow are so critical. Not only do we need to secure this year's request of $2.4 billion to ensure Israel's qualitative military edge, but we must begin to lay the groundwork about the importance of Israel's future aid as well. For many members of Congress, the 65 freshman members in particular, this will be their first conversation and, candidly, their first real education about the value and importance of American aid to Israel. Tomorrow is a critical teaching opportunity for each one of us. My friends, we cannot afford to fall short. We cannot afford to be distracted or intimidated. And quite frankly, that is exactly what our detractors are trying to do. In the past year, the voices of prominent critics, decorated generals, accomplished academics, and yes, even a former president, have been heard repeating anew the old libels our ancestors heard in different lands at different times. Again, I ask, why now? Why now are they raising their voices? I know when you hear these critics speak, it's tempting to hear the very idea of Israel under attack. But when they advance their slanders, when they recycle the old charges of our old enemies with new insistence, I hear something else. I hear the voice of frustration. Frustration because we are winning the war of ideas. Frustration because American friends of Israel have the will, the resolve, and the strength of spirit to be heard. Frustration because the relationship between America and Israel is strong and growing stronger. Ladies and gentlemen, our detractors are frustrated by our success, and the only response to them must be continued success. It was the spring of 1948. Jerusalem and its 100,000 residents were under siege. The city was cut off from all contact from the coast. The people there, isolated, alone, measuring out their dwindling supplies of food, water, and ammunition. Would there be enough water for another day, another meal, another battle? Each night in the self-imposed darkness that is the last protection of a city under siege, talk focused on the hope that Jewish forces would break through the Arab Legion's lines, 3 times in those dark days, forces tried the Arab line. 3 times they failed. Each time, each failure was a test of spirit. Could the people of Jerusalem endure? Could they persevere against the darkness until the moment of their deliverance? My friends, we say of that time, Jerusalem did not yield. Jerusalem did not break. But what we mean is that the people of Jerusalem, the men, women, and children in that city, the grandmother singing a frightened child to sleep, the father whose plate was empty so that his pregnant wife might eat, the boy or girl of those dark nights who braved the fear to become the mother or father of one of us. The people did not break. They rose each day resolved to save their families, and they saved a city. In saving a city, they built a nation. They had so little, and still they had enough. They had so little, and what they had, they gave. So what of us? What if what we have and who we are is preparation for who we must be at this hour of need? What will we do in this time of darkness and danger? What will we give to save a nation under siege? I look around this room and I know what our answer will be. I see the men and women of AIPAC possessing the stamina and resolve to transform this dark moment into a time of deliverance, a time of strength and security, a time of freedom and peace. When the historians write of this period, when they recall the extraordinary efforts to repel the enemies of Israel and America, they will almost certainly write that Israel did not break, that America did not yield. But they will mean that the people of Israel did not break, and that you did not yield. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Howard. This morning's session has truly been a testament to the strength of the U.S.-Israel relationship. Tonight, we will reaffirm that strength at our gala banquet, where we honor members of Congress in a bipartisan celebration that will draw most of the Senate, a third of the House, and scores of diplomats and dignitaries. At this time, everyone should proceed to their regional lobbying meetings. Thank you and have a great day.